In the early tense months of World War II, much of the world held its breath, just waiting for the storm to break. The period known as the Phony War was anything but quiet behind closed planning room doors. While armies stared across fortified borders, a different battle was brewing in the north. Neutral Norway, long, rugged coastline, quiet fjords, was about to become a critical, overlooked strategic prize. It was where geography, resources, which in naval power would collide. Controlling Norway meant controlling a vital artery of the war. The public saw a peaceful, neutral country. London and Berlin saw an unsinkable aircraft carrier and a gateway to the North Atlantic. For the Royal Navy, securing Norway tightened the naval blockade on Germany. For the Kriegsmarine, Norway offered a way to break the blockade and unleash U-boats on Allied shipping. Norway's labyrinth of fjords concealed fleets and opened the Atlantic to German reach, a quiet, undeclared race against time. The British interest in Norway was driven by one of the most influential figures of the war, Winston Churchill. Even before he became Prime Minister, as First Lord of the Admiralty, Churchill pushed for aggressive action. He saw Norway as the key to a proactive strategy. Germany's war industry depended on high-grade Swedish iron ore, especially in winter. With the Baltic frozen, ore ran by rail to Narvik, then by sea through neutral waters to German ports. Churchill called it Germany's Achilles heel. His plan mined the Norwegian coast, Operation Wilfred, forcing ore ships into open water. There, the Royal Navy could destroy them. Across the North Sea, the Altmark incident confirmed Hitler's fear that Britain would ignore Norwegian neutrality. He became convinced the Allies would seize Norway to stop the ore. Raeder argued Norway's bases would let U-boats and raiders bypass the blockade. From Trondheim and Bergen, submarines could slip into the Atlantic and strike convoys. It would turn the tables on the Royal Navy and threaten Britain itself. For Hitler, securing ore and breaking the blockade made invading Norway a necessity. Both sides saw the stakes. Only one would move first. As Churchill pushed for action, a broader plan took shape among British staff. It was codenamed Operation R4. Not just mining, R4 was a blueprint for an Allied landing and occupation in Norway. It was reactive, triggered the moment Germany moved, giving political cover. Publicly, it would be framed as aid to a small neutral nation. Objectives were ambitious. Seize Narvik to cut the winter iron ore lifeline to Germany. Capture key southern ports to deny German naval and air bases. The goal, lock the Kriegsmarine in the Baltic and harden the blockade. A multi-pronged landing, small Allied forces counting on Norwegian resistance. They expected little opposition from the population. R4's early cover was aid to Finland during the Winter War, moving troops under a humanitarian pretext. When Finland made peace, the pretext vanished, but R4 stayed ready. British ships sat loaded with troops and equipment, poised to sail at a moment's notice. The strategic importance of Norway centered on the distant, ice-free port of Narvik. Warmed by the Gulf Stream, Narvik stayed open year-round while the Baltic froze. Ore from Kiruna and Gällivare moved by rail to Narvik, an umbilical cord to German steel. In 1939, roughly 11 of 22 million tons of German iron ore came from Sweden, much through Narvik. No ore meant no steel, and no steel meant no victory. Norway's west coast is a maze of fjords, islands, and sheltered inlets stretching over 1,500 miles. Deep fjords hid fleets behind steep cliffs and narrow, easily defended channels. They were perfect havens for U-boats and surface raiders. The British wanted these ports not just to deny Germany, but to use them as forward bases. From Norway, the Royal Navy could patrol the Atlantic, guard convoys, and tighten the blockade. It pushed Britain's defensive line east, bottling the German fleet and keeping war away from home. Control of Norway meant sea lanes, economic survival, and decisive geography. While Britain debated violating Norwegian neutrality, Germany moved. On March 1st, Hitler issued a top-secret directive, Operation Weserübung. It was the simultaneous invasion of Denmark and Norway. All three branches would strike at once. Surprise landings targeted Oslo and Narvik, among others. It gambled on speed, surprise, and brief Norwegian resistance. Britain finally acted. Operation Wilfred began on April 8th, mining off Narvik. Our 4 troops stood ready to follow, but a vast German fleet was already steaming toward Norway under cover of darkness. Before dawn on April 9th, disguised warships slipped into fjords, and paratroopers seized airfields at Oslo and Stavanger. Norwegian guns at Oscarsborg sank the cruiser Blucher, but elsewhere, surprise carried the day. The government fled north, chaos spread, and the Allies were stunned. R4 was overtaken by events. The Allies now faced an entrenched enemy, especially around Narvik. Germany had won the sprint. Britain's failure to act first had immediate consequences. The Allied counter-campaign suffered from poor planning, inadequate equipment, and lack of air cover. They briefly retook Narvik in late May, French and Polish units among the victors, but the success was short-lived. As France collapsed, the Allies evacuated. By June 1940, Norway was under German control. The political shock in Britain toppled Neville Chamberlain after a furious Commons debate. Winston Churchill became Prime Minister on May 10th, the day Germany invaded France and the Low Countries. Germany secured Swedish ore and the Atlantic-facing bases it wanted, fueling its war machine. U-boats and aircraft from Norway mauled convoys, most infamously PQ-17, prolonging and deepening the Battle of the Atlantic. Operation R4 shows the cost of hesitation, sound strategy mired in politics and neutrality concerns. The Germans acted with ruthless audacity and reaped the rewards. The campaign secured resources, strengthened the Kriegsmarine, and reshaped the Atlantic War. In irony, the failed British plan elevated the man who would lead the Allies to victory.